Ladies and gentlemen, let's check out the Centipede skills available for the Spiritborn class in Diablo 4 Vessel of Hatred. Let's dig into the basic skills right now. The first basic skill for the Centipede is a poison-based skill called Withering Fist. It generates 9 vigors and allows you to dart and jab an enemy, dealing 6 damage and applying 45 poison damage over 6 seconds. Enhanced Withering Fist allows you to gain 1 vigor per second for every nearby poisoned enemy who's been poisoned by Withering Fist, up to 10 vigor per second. Sharp Withering Fist says now Withering Fist's third attack spreads its poisoning to 3 unaffected nearby enemies, but hitting a vulnerable enemy also spreads the poison effect. Accelerated Withering Fist says enemies poisoned by Withering Fist deal 20% less damage. In the core skills, we've got Stinger for the Centipede. It's poison damage, it costs 40 vigor, and it says you strike a small area dealing 133 damage to enemies within the area as well as all surrounding poisoned enemies. Enhancing that with Enhanced Stinger says that it now applies 50% of its base damage as poisoning over 6 seconds to all enemies that it hits. Additionally, you can choose Rampant Stinger, which allows it to deal 5% increased direct damage to elites for every nearby poisoned enemy. Advantageous Stinger says if Stinger strikes a vulnerable enemy, it heals you for 10% of your maximum life. If you're healthy, it makes enemies vulnerable for 3 seconds. From the focus skill tree, you've got a Centipede Incarnate skill called Toxic Skin. It's got a 15-second cooldown, and passively says enemies that attack you are poisoned for 45 damage over 3 seconds. While it's active, your toxins overflow, applying the poisoning in a trail and making you unhindered for 5 seconds. Enhanced Toxic Skin says that while Toxic Skin's active, its poisoning is increased by 100%, in this case 90 poison over 3 seconds. Replenishing Toxic Skin says now it passively increases thorn damage you deal to poisoned enemies by 100%. Finally, you have Measured Toxic Skin, so while this skill is active, your poisoning deals an additional 25% of its damage over time as critical strike damage to vulnerable enemies. In the defensive tree, the Centipede gets to enjoy Scourge. It's a defensive Centipede skill that does poison damage with a 12-second cooldown. You call forth a wave of insects that bite enemies, fearing and slowing them for 3 seconds and apply 151 poison damage over 6 seconds. You can then empower that with Enhanced Scourge, so each time you hit an enemy with Scourge, you get 1% increased damage versus crowd control enemies for 6 seconds, up to 50% increased damage. Enhancing that further gives you Adaptable Scourge, so a lucky hit, hitting an enemy affected by Scourge has a 50% chance to lifesteal 35% of the damage that you deal. Or you can choose Reinforced Scourge, so whenever you cast Scourge, it grants 100% of your maximum vigor over 6 seconds. In the defensive tree, there's 2 minor nodes that play to the Centipede. It's Antivenom, so you gain 15% increased poison resistance and your maximum poison res is increased by 5%. Additionally, then there's Nourishment. Your healing is increased by 25%, and whenever you heal, your poison damage is increased by 6% for 3 seconds, up to a 30% cap. In the potency tree, we've got Touch of Death, which is a poison centipede skill. It's got a 15-second cooldown. It says that you strike an enemy and infect them, dealing 6 damage and applying 453 poison damage over 9 seconds. When the infection expires or the host dies, who was affected by the skill, a swarm hatches and seeks out enemies for 9 seconds, dealing 13 damage per hit. And you can have up to 3 swarms active at once. Enhanced Touch of Death says that Touch of Death's infection now heals you for 2% of your maximum life per second, for a total of 18% maximum life. You heal for any remaining amount when the swarm hatches. Invasive Touch of Death says that Touch of Death's swarms burst every second, applying 30% of the base poison damage over 6 seconds to surrounding enemies. So it just overtakes. Poised Touch of Death says that Touch of Death is now a core skill which costs 70 vigor and has no cooldown, so you can spam it if you have the vigor to do so. In the potency tree, you've got the Ravenous minor node, so your centipede skills deal 15% increased damage, but you double that amount versus healthy enemies. A healthy enemy is anything that has more than 80% of its HP. Oppressive says your centipede skills deal some amount of damage, in this case 30 because it's maxed, to crowd-controlled enemies and gain 15% additional crowd control duration. Finally, you've got the Devourer ultimate centipede skill. It's a poison damage skill with a 45-second cooldown that says the centipede spirit emerges, blasting enemies in a line for 191 damage and spitting at others for 54 damage, and it lasts for 15 seconds. The Harmonious Devourer skill says as this Devourer emerges, it launches 10 toxic globs that apply 143 poison damage over 6 seconds wherever those poison globs happen to land. The Exalted Devourer says when the Devourer is active, if a non-boss enemy's remaining life becomes poisoned, they die instantly and unleash a pestilent swarm that deals 40 damage per hit to enemies it passes through. And now you know what I know. When we played the test on July 12th, this centipede was kind of doing a lot more damage than intended. They knew that it was bugged. We were communicating that. And anybody that's playing this will probably tell you Centipede felt the best because the damage is overtuned. Just remember, we're level 30. It doesn't necessarily make it bad, but now you know what the skills are that we were using when we played the Spiritborn in the playtest. I hope this gets the ideas kind of roll around in your mind. And again, make sure to check the description. There's going to be a link to every other skill for all the other spirits available in Diablo 4 for the Spiritborn as of July 12th when I playtested it. Now you know what I know. What do you think about the Spiritborn? And what do you think about the Centipede Spirit? Much love to anybody that checks this out. Thank you so much. And I hope this information helps you and gets you thinking about ways to enjoy the Spiritborn. Much love. Thanks for checking out the video. I'll see you in the next one.